Hello everyone, this is your video tutorial for the TQE reading strategy of note-taking. So the letters T, Q, and E each stand for something different. T stands for thoughts. So as you notice on this page, let me move my picture up there, thoughts are really just anything you're thinking about as you are reading. So it might be noticings about literary devices. Maybe you notice something about the plot line. You notice something that relates to the conflict. Maybe you get to the climax of the story and you recognize, oh, that's the climax. Maybe it has to do with character development or the setting, whatever it might be. It could be something that you're reading and you think, oh, that's the conflict. That's a noticing about a literary device. You could do observations about character behavior, specifically the protagonist, because generally speaking, in any kind of story, the protagonist is going to change throughout the course of the story because of the conflict, because of the rising action that happens. So as you're watching the character throughout the story, as they change, maybe they change their thoughts, maybe they change their opinions. Sometimes they physically change, like they change their hairstyles or their clothing. In science fiction, they could literally change their face sometimes. So just be watching those observations of think about how the character began the story and where do you see their changes in their behavior throughout the story because of the events that happened to them. Recognizing the writer's craft. So looking at how the writer has done something, maybe you notice something in the writing that is really impactful. It really stands out to you. So what do you notice about that? What type of language did they use? Did they use sensory language or figurative language? What kinds of words? When we talk about diction or word choice, what do you notice about the word choices in that part? How did they structure the sentence? So really paying attention to where the subject is and where the action is. Did they do it maybe a little bit differently? So really looking at how the writer has put this together to make it something that's really interesting. You could be making connections to other texts. I know that in your middle school, you learned about text to text connections, text to self, and text to world. So as you're reading, maybe you make a connection to another book you've read or a movie you've seen or a music video, a song that you know. Something happens and it reminds you of this other thing. That's a connection. You want to take a note on that. A personal experience you've had, that's a text to self connection. Or maybe it makes you think about things that are going on in our world today, politically, in our government, in our schools, in society. If what you're reading about makes you think about something else, that's a connection. You want to take a note on that. And finally, just really be paying attention. What are you thinking about as you are reading the text? So as you're going through, really be paying attention to your thoughts and be jotting those things down. The second part of the TQE is the Q, which is questions. And so these might be questions that are causing you confusion. Maybe there's something in the story you're like, what? I don't understand. Maybe there's something that the character does that if the character was a real person, like right here, like, hello, what would you ask that character? Why do you think this is a good idea? Well, let me tell you, right? Okay. So ask the character a question or ask the author. The writer didn't just throw these words on paper and suddenly it became a story. There was a purpose for that. Why? So write your question that you would ask the author. Also, you want to pay attention to the impact that this story has had on you, the reader. So as you're reading through, how does this story influence you in some way? What does it make you think about something? Does it make you feel a particular way? Does it change or challenge some thinking that you had, like you had a belief before, and after reading this, now you're like, do I still feel the same way? Do I still think the same way? So really question what impact this is having on you. And how can I help you with this? Maybe you get to a part that's really confusing, you don't understand. Write a question for me, like, Mrs. Coucher, I don't understand what this is. And generally, normally, I should say, we would be in the class, and that's something you could raise your hand and ask. We're going to have to do things a little bit differently now in distance learning, but those are still questions you want to write down. The last thing in the TQE is an epiphany. An epiphany, what is that? Well, an epiphany is a new idea. It's something that comes to you all of a sudden. It's like inspiration, or it's a new thought that you hadn't had before. So the types of epiphanies you want to be looking for are those aha moments, or I like to call them, the light bulb moment. When you see like a cartoon character and the light bulb comes on and they're like, oh, I get it now. That's an aha moment. That's an epiphany. It's like, oh, I didn't know this. I just read this. Now I understand. It could be a surprise, or maybe some new revelation, something new that comes up in the story that you weren't expecting. That's an epiphany. It could be literal an identification of a literary device. As we start learning about literary devices and you're reading, you might find one and go, oh my gosh, that's a metaphor. That's an epiphany. Write that down. Recognizing the writer's craft. As we start learning some writing techniques and you start learning some of those terms, you may recognize those things in writing. And that, again, that's an epiphany. Oh, that's what that looks like. Connections to another text. Again, as you're thinking about your reading, it could be something that, oh, that reminds me of that. Oh, it's written by the same author. Oh my gosh, that makes total sense now. And then also the impact that it has on you. So again, as you're reading through the story and you're thinking about this story and maybe how it's challenged or changed your thinking, that's an impact that it has on you. It makes you realize, oh, wait, I used to think this, but now I'm beginning to see this from another perspective. I'm seeing it from a different point of view. So in the TQE, remember, you want to take notes about your thoughts, your thinking while you're reading, your questions, and your epiphanies. Happy note taking!